Welcome to Software Without Borders, where we explore how technology, leadership, and execution come together to shape modern software organizations. I'm Tomas Hilliard, Chief Strategy Officer, and I'm joined by my co-host, Olivier Pollard, CTO and Managing Director of Software Strategies. Today's guest is Ben Coffman, SVP of Engineering and Product at Stack. Ben has led engineering organizations across financial services, construction tech, and AI-driven platforms, scaling teams from early-stage environments to large, complex systems.
And what really stands out about Ben is that he's not just talking about AI in theory. He has actually implemented it inside real systems like computer vision pipelines, 3D modeling workflows, and large-scale data infrastructure. All this while improving delivery speed and team performance. Ben, great to have you on the show.
Great to be on the show. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Well, Ben, thanks again for joining us. And I've been lucky enough to get to know you over the course of a few conversations over the past month or two. But for our audience, could you please, to start, give us a short description of your professional arc and maybe something that's influenced who you are as a human?
Ooh, that's a really broad question to start up with. I would say, for professional arc, I would definitely say, computers in general, just starting as a young child and then using it as kind of the platform to kind of build and shape my life around. And it's been a wonderful journey. And, main thing is just being susceptible to change. That always happens.
So as far as influence as a human, you've just always been interested in computers, technology, and maybe what software development can produce as far as results go.
Yeah, we were. My father was just in town. Spring break. We did a little camping on the beach, and we were kind of reminiscing about the books that we read as a kid. He was going to be handing down one of his books to me that it was like a little family heirloom, and he's like, "What was your book?" And I was like, "Oh man, it's so nerdy." And it was Bill Gates. It was in like early high school, maybe middle school. It's called The Road Ahead. And he's talking about what the internet holds. And I just remember laying in bed reading that at night. And thinking, man, I'm a nerd, but also I am so excited about what's ahead for the internet. And here we are having a podcast over the internet.
Absolutely. And, it's no surprise to anyone here that software has touched every industry. But I'm curious as to how you found yourself in construction tech and what led you there.
Yeah, that's a great story too. I worked for some more traditional organizations to begin with. I kind of took the traditional route. Capital One had a huge influence on me. I got to see a lot of people leave Capital One and do startups, and I realized that that's something that really catered towards my personality. It's very much a meritocracy. You get in there and you show your worth real quickly. But there's a lot of upside and a lot of swings up and down. And that's just something that I fundamentally enjoyed. So at one point, I made this huge decision that I want to go work for a startup. But to everybody else, I was just this guy that worked for these, big, stodgy old companies. And it took a lot of convincing. And just out of dumb luck, I got Procore. And then Procore ended up IPOing. And that was it. I was hooked.
Very interesting. And so now we're at the chapter where you're at Stack, you're SVP of Engineering and Product. Can you tell me a little bit more about Stack, something about the organization? And you're in a unique position leading engineering and product. Can you tell me what interesting nuances that might bring?
Yeah, I love it. To be honest, the one area I always found a bit challenging with engineering, and I'm sure it was vice versa with product, is it was really hard to get this cohesive vision that incorporated engineering efforts and product efforts together. And so I was really pushing for some sort of role where I could kind of drive both of those in dual streams and make sure that each is well represented, but also reflects the outcome that you're looking to drive the most value to the company. And so Stack had this wonderful offer to be able to do both product and engineering, but they also really wanted to dive into AI. And they wanted to dive in from two prongs, not only from the engineering standpoint, which has been spectacularly exciting, but also from the product standpoint. And that just really resonated with me and hit in a wheelhouse that I knew would be a lot of work, but it'd be something that I'd be very, I think I'd be very successful at.
So you brought up the topic of the day, the topic of probably the last 2 or 3 years, obviously AI. We've mentioned to start off the podcast that you've led multiple teams through Cloud, mobile, microservices, and now AI is at the forefront. So tell me, when did you realize that this wave was not just a fad, that it was actually going to stay and change the way that engineering teams operate?
That's that all started at Procore.
Mm.
I've always been an early adopter of technologies. It started, of course, with the web and then mobile. And you'll know you're in the right area if people are like, it's worthless. It's not the right one. It'll never. They use this, say AI, ML. What's the difference between that and statistics? And you're like, well, just give it time. You'll get there. Procore was the first place I started at, and it was great. It was like a little ragtag team, like 5 of us, and we built something pretty special while we were there. I was very proud of it. Basically, in short, we used the Inception model from Google, so it's a computer vision model, and we used that to recognize various aspects of photos that were being taken on site in construction and be able to easily categorize them, with the full intent to start analyzing them wholly and comparing them against schedules and costs, and saying, "Hey, it cost you $10 to lay this amount of cement on one project. It should cost you about 10 on the next." Well, that got the CTO of the time, Sam. He really liked the idea, and that was also very invigorating. And so he kind of pulled me in, and I got to speak to the board a little bit about it, and really pitch the idea. At the time, they were really getting close to an IPO, so it was hard to take pretty big moonshots, and it didn't quite get as much traction as I would like. But later on, it led on to the work at Scanifly, which is a 3D software where we do drone 3D modeling and utilizing a drone and using AI to recognize objects and deciduous trees, and then which led to Stack.
Hmm. And so I'd be curious as to, when does it begin to show up more so in your engineering teams and in your day-to-day coding?
Well, yeah, that is the real. So, Scanifly was the first place it showed up in, and I had a little insight. I had a hack. I had a good mentor of mine that worked at Meta, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, AI coding is taking off. Like, it's going crazy here. You need to get on board. If you're not on board, you're going to get left behind." There's a double-edged sword there. First, it was kind of selling the CEO, who was a little bit more traditional in nature, and then engineers. At first glance, the ones that didn't fully buy off on it kind of felt threatened by it. That would be my analysis. It could have been many things. And then as time moved on, and I came over to Stack, the crew there would just, it's based out of Ohio, so a lot of Midwestern guys. I'm originally from Kansas. I'm Midwestern, but they were into it. They wanted the change. They dove right in. So this is kind of the first area that we really saw that I really saw mass adoption of AI code. And that also goes in line with the maturity of like platforms like Claude and ChatGPT, Codex.
I've got a few questions. There's been a lot of noise, of course, about AI in general, copilots and agents, automation, whatever. From your perspective, what do you think? Where have you seen AI actually delivering real value, especially with engineering teams?
Yeah, with engineering teams for sure. That's the easy one. That's the low hanging fruit. Our crews, buying into it, hook, line, and sinker. There's several caveats that come around with it, of course. One of the big ones is code reviews, because you're producing a lot more code a lot more frequently. But one of the most surprising areas to me was product. A byproduct for product was that engineering now was chewing through their work a lot faster. And instead of hiring more product people in order for them to keep up, they needed to be able to research and provide the body of work for the engineers to build along with the design. And so we started using AI to not only help out with the research and help out with the ticket generation, but also started using AI to help build out some quick designs for the devs to work off of, to keep up with the speed that they were working with using AI. So to me, that has been one of the nuances of the journey that I wasn't prepared for, but really, really enjoyed.
So you're talking about more or less pre-prototyping, more or less, before the work starts?
Yeah, and, in the traditional, set, it would, a product owner would reach out to a customer and talk to them quite a bit, and then, they would reach out to design, and they would kinda work together and iterate through designs with customers, and then they'd break it down into these chunks of work,
Mm.
and, with these chunks of work, they would move that over to the engineers to start building. Now we're utilizing AI to not only kind of scavenge all of our sales and customer service calls to try to
Mhm.
preemptively get an idea of what we're looking for, but we've created these architectural design patterns that they can import into Claude and create I wouldn't even say like a prototype, create a real time mock up for them to use, uh, for the developers to use as they're building out their code.
Okay, good. And then, conversely, are there any areas where you haven't seen the needle move really?
Where we haven't seen the needle move?
Yeah.
This is a tricky one, and this is a balance, and I don't know the right answer to this one, but, we're also looking broader in the organization on how we can utilize AI with customer service and sales.
Hmm.
Now, there's a few startups out there. I think Kixie's one of them. I spoke to their CEO a little bit. They have some great kind of preemptive sales, and the scary part is that you can't hardly tell if you're talking to a human or
Mhm.
a person, but there is a very humans, general artificial general intelligence hasn't quite made it yet. So humans can still kind of sniff it out. And so there's a very fine line of, do we want to risk the potential of prolonging the sale or not having the satisfactory customer support response when we're dealing with voice, not necessarily chat. Um, and so that part I don't think we've seen it move the needle as much, but, companies like Kixie, Sierra with Brett Taylor, I think they're doing some really, really magical stuff.
But from an engineering standpoint, obviously, you've seen great progress uh, and great help from AI, obviously.
Wild progress. I mean, and like a little hot take on this that, traditionally engineering has been not always, this is a hot take, a little bit more of a young man's game. It's an athletic sport, if you will. You tend to see the people more mature in their career moving towards different
Mm.
roles to accentuate the wisdom that they have. With AI, there's this really unique paradigm that's happening that the wisdom honestly becomes the most valuable aspect, and that real sharp, 20s brain that could solve these complex problems very quickly is not really a differentiator anymore. So we're seeing some of the best code and some of the fastest code come out of the engineers that have just been in the space for the longest amount of time. That was a wild curveball that I'm,
Hmm.
kind of enjoying to see.
Excellent.
So, Ben, just to stick on that point, I guess with this moment of euphoria, or not euphoria, of eureka,
Yeah.
rather, how does that change how you are organizing your engineering teams, or how does that change how you're designing your operating model?
Just holistically, AI has changed everything from how we set up our organization in the engineering and product department, and then also on how we leverage the skill set and the talents of the individuals. From an organizational standpoint, it's very much now around speed and very little process. So we've started this methodology called high impact pods, and I would love to take credit for it, but a mentor of mine kind of slid uh, Word doc over to me and said, "Hey, take a look at this. What do you think?" And oh, I love it, right? And I'm gonna run with this. And so, um, what high impact pods entails is you operate with a team of two engineers and a shared product owner and a theoretical shared designer. Now, the designer is operating a little bit more abstract. The idea being is that the kind of in the similar transition that we went through from waterfall to agile and scrum, this is even more lightweight. And so that we still more or less use Jira, but people aren't really logging into it anymore. They're kind of MCPing through Claude into it to grab their tickets and tickets to be created. It's more just like a data repository. And so the product people are running about 3 pods, and and each pod has a couple engineers. And so we found that this organizational way helps the developers not work more independently, but but still are able to communicate effectively as a team. Now, there have been pieces that have been challenging in that arena because they're moving so fast in regards to people touching the same part of the code base at the same time and making pretty significant changes.
Mhm.
But we're working through those.
I'd be interested to hear your response to it, and knowing that you are working with AI native teams and bringing clients to some of our great software development partners around the world. I'd be curious to hear your perspective on Ben's pod setup.
No, that sounds right. I mean, to me, the smaller the pod, the better. It enables better communication, less risk, etc., less misinterpretation of the requirements. And it's typically those small teams are more nimble. That's why Agile worked well, because now we went from a whole team of 100 to 10 teams of 10 or 12 teams of 8 or whatever that is at the time, right? But now we're talking about even having half the size of what the typical pod would be. So from 8 to 4 to 3, etc. So, but it's still, some project will still require maybe a large number of pods, I would say. I would assume. Is that right?
Yeah, we're right around 12, 13
Yeah.
pods, and we had to create a few new rules, right?
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is uh, so we use Claude Code, and people will be touching some similar code bases at the same time. Now, Claude's getting really good at holding memory for the individual and their past and what they've done, and kind of being able to have a little bit of a predictive nature going forward. But what it doesn't share is that context across all the developers.
Yeah.
And I'm certain that that will be in the future. But what happens is if somebody changes a method, which happened traditionally in the past, and you would do code reviews and you would merge it. But if you're having, 1,000 code reviews a day, I'm exaggerating, but maybe 150 or 100 a day. If somebody foundationally changes a method and 10,000 lines get written and another 10,000 get written over here, and this method is instrumental, and so this works and this doesn't, then you get in a pretty hairy situation of trying to figure out what went wrong there. So this orchestrator role that we've built, and we have one kind of is a person that's representational for product, but the main one is for engineering. As the work kind of comes in, he very much in a real time it starts directing like, okay, this is a part of the code base that nobody's really touching right now. You guys go conquer. And this is a part of the code base that nobody else
Yeah.
is touching. You go and conquer. The problem we're navigating with that now is the frequency of that communication. It's frequent and it's a very taxing. It's like an air traffic controller. That's actually exactly what it's like.
Yeah, and I can vouch for this because I've managed very, very large teams as well. And one of the problems was dependency management. AI or no AI, okay, that was the problem, because now you have, I had at the time 800 people on that team, and in 5 different locations offshore. And when you don't know who else is doing what, then it can become a very, very quickly a problem of dependency problems, right? So it's all about dependencies in the end. So I'd be curious to know how you use AI from that context, from a dependency management standpoint.
I would love to tell you we have solved that problem. We're solving that problem. We're in the midst of solving that problem. There's the easy routes that I could tell you, and everybody will be like, yeah, sure, of course, that's it. But it's just a really interesting thing because dependency management in the past was just a little bit slower by nature,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
the changes were slower by nature. But now the changes are happening so rapidly that we're just kind of figuring it out as we go. Uh, I would say the number one thing, kind of going back to what you were saying, Oliver, is the communication. it's like, don't be afraid to use that huddle button on Slack. Don't be afraid to communicate with everybody. But also, there's a big part of the code reviews too. And so one way to help alleviate that is to use AI for code reviews. And Claude's offered a great service. There's also CodeRabbit and a few others, but Claude's is rather expensive. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to play around with it, but it's about $15 to $20 a code review.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Ben, that's where I was going to go next. You've been talking about, hey, we're more nimble, we're more flexible, we can produce more. Engineering is utilizing it, products utilizing it. We're seeing where we can implement AI across the organization. I'm thinking to myself, what are the financial impacts on engineering and product with the amount that you can produce, and how are you looking to provide enough governance and oversight to make sure that that doesn't get out of control?
Yeah. So this is, the Patrick Donnelly. He's the one that kind of gave me the idea of the pod, and so him and I meet weekly, and we bounce ideas off each other, chatting. He's in Scotland, so we chat. I send him at 2 a.m, and he gets message from me from 2 a.m. We have this theory that eventually, it wouldn't be surprising to me if Claude starts charging the equivalent amount of a cheap engineer. So they start charging $60,000 to $80,000 a year for a seat. For us directly right now, that's kind of forecasting to the future. For us directly right now, our token usage is going through the roof. It's very high. And I kind of have to have weekly meetings with our financials, being like, all right, here's what we can expect, And so far, everybody's been pretty appreciating of it. We're going up about 1,000 to 2,000 a week sometimes in terms of cost. But the one thing that the CEO keeps, of Stack keeps hitting me up about is like, great, you're shipping a lot. Where's the value? What's the value you're giving back to the customer? And so that's been another big thing that we've had to work really hard on from the product standpoint, is to really start quantifying value. Great, you're shipping a lot of features, a lot of great features, but where are we getting the most value out of these features? And that's also been a part of the journey for us.
And I'd say that's probably your hottest take of the podcast, is that Claude down the line is going to start charging, very junior levels of engineering salaries in order to have a seat. Olivier, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't think the technology is there yet to completely replace people. So they won't be able to justify that as of yet. I mean, probably in a couple of years, maybe. I don't know yet, but we'll see. That being said, I still think that the future entails both humans and machines. I see this as code as a service, if you will, the same way we moved away from, for the most part, on-premise compute to on-demand compute. So it's the same thing here. We've got to be careful about how we use that on-demand, essentially, coding services, right?
I would build upon that exactly. And I might have misrepresented, I still believe there will be human engineers wholeheartedly. There's just too many pieces that have to be stitched together from a people and architecture and customer standpoint. I just believe that instead of having maybe 2 engineers, you'll have one with an equivalent seat sitting next to it, like a Claude seat sitting next to it, that they're charging just as much for.
Yeah, at the same time, sorry, I've used Claude as well, and sometimes, so this morning I made I'm prototyping certain things. I made a very, very simple change in a database, and I wanted to test Claude, how quickly it could be done. I can tell you that change, I would have done it in 5 seconds. It took Claude 15 minutes to do it. It burnt, I don't know how many tokens.
20,000 tokens.
Yeah, something in those lines. I'm not sure if it's purposeful or what. But in the end, okay, there are certain things that AI can be very, very good at, and other things that are not. So the things that, to me, that AI would be very good at is to find the needle in a haystack.
No, that's going back to your earlier point, I often question how ChatGPT and Claude, Anthropic kind of come up with these token usage. Seems like a pretty good hustle, right? It's not super
Yeah,
clear, and they can kind of dial it up and dial it down. And yeah, if you're doing a simple insert into a table,
that's
it
exactly it.
should,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's simple insert update. In fact, it was an update in the table. You're removing one item and adding 3 or 4, whatever, so that the drop down would be a little bit different, but on the UI. But in the end, it took, and it's not just the number of tokens, it took my
yeah,
time as well. I was sitting
yeah.
there watching it, just to see, what would happen, etcetera. And that was interesting to observe.
One of the more kind of fun aspects of it. It does at times feel like a little bit of a hustle. I can't quite remember what the original question was that we steered out of that.
Well, maybe to bring us back, I think we've done a really good job of touching on where AI is affecting the organization as a whole, then where it's affecting us in an engineering sense and in your sense, specifically in your pods. But from an individual level, I'm curious, Ben, what do you see habits that are changing the most because of an AI augmented world?
Yeah. So, going back to I think the original question Oliver said we are seeing AI helping with training devs. Like, so they're able to comb the code base and learn it very quickly now. It's so the code base is almost self-teaching when you have Claude and it's able to step through it. That has been tremendous, especially for new hires.
Hmm.
Uh, for me personally, I just feel like it's up to my IQ. I come across overwriting way, way more intelligent than I think maybe I am, right? In that regard, it's also just a great spot check for me to with everything that I do to just kind of cross reference. So you know, outside of the coding, which is the most obvious stuff, the day to day in terms of, writing emails or presentations or coming up with budgets is, stuff that people don't even necessarily think to use it on. It's actually really great as a partner in crime. And so it's become my kind of buddy, if you will, and say, what am I missing? And we kind of have a joke around Stack is ask better questions,
Mm.
and we found that that kind of mantra not only helps everyone in terms of what they're doing for their organization, but specifically an engineering product who's fully embraced AI helps them get the most out of AI.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned you envision a future where AI and engineers are collaborating together. And I would love to hear your description or your prediction of what that human who orchestrates with an AI engineer would look like and what characteristic and traits they need to have in order to be successful in leading an AI tool.
Just watch Star Trek. You get all your answers there. I that's all that comes to my mind. The best the core idea is that is the one thing that I have seen, especially for people kind of soaring in it outside of engineering, is learning how to wrap their mind around of just asking questions and giving it context. It has to be like you're just talking to another human. You have to shape the context. You have to tell AI what's going on, and then you have to know how to ask it the right questions and know how to ask it to ask you the right questions.
Hmm.
And that last piece is the piece that I almost see everybody kind of drop. And it's such a little hack of just saying, hey, you know, I feel like I'm missing something. Can you kind of give me this area feels weak? Can you ask me some questions that you think would make this meatier or might represent something that I'm missing? And then it opens up usually a nice little rabbit hole for you to go down.
Love it. Love it. And so, last question on the individual level. New tools, we're teaching people what habits they need to pick up, what they need to learn. On the flip side of it, what habits are you discouraging your engineers or your teams from using now or from doing now that they have AI and it can be automated, the efficiency can be increased?
The only thing I'm necessarily discouraging is not using AI. But that's usually the first question is, have you used AI on it? And if you haven't, please give it a shot. But everything else in regards to AI, it's so new. There's everybody's figuring stuff out as we go. And I mean, it's just wonderful. There's this Ralph Wiggum paradigm that's coming up that we've played around with in terms of software development with AI. it feels, you know what? It feels even better than the mobile era. It feels like the web where everybody's just figuring stuff out, and the iteration cycle on it is absolutely wild. It's gone from, what used to be maybe months, to quarters, to now like on a weekly basis, we're seeing change. So this really, the discouragement might be the discouraging of not using AI. Like, use AI, make it part of everything you do. Worst case scenario, you burn 5 minutes and you get nothing out of it.
Before I throw it over to Olivier, you know what, Ben? We have all different types of guests on this podcast, and I really like that you put yourself in the category of I'm in the experimentation lane. I am in the we need to try things out and continue to see what works and doesn't work. Sometimes we have the AI naysayers. Sometimes we have the people who have absolutely no guardrails with AI, and I think it's really fresh to hear your perspective as far as the only thing I'm discouraging is not using it at all.
Yeah, thank you.
And still talking about people here, and then I'll follow up on that one question. Do you see any differences between the more senior and the junior engineers into adopting AI or how they use it? Adoption is one thing, of course, but then once it's adopted, how they use it, why they use it. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not actually. I think if you look at what makes outside of intelligence, what makes a great engineer at the core is curiosity and the willingness to accept change.
Mhm.
And I can unabashedly say at Stack, that's what we have through and through. So in terms of years of experience or juniorness, the idea of adopting AI is just been pretty consistent throughout the whole organization. The one thing that I have seen is that more juniors are pretty quick on the draw with the gun, and which is to be expected, right? In in the past, if that's like 50 lines or 100 lines of code, that's cool. We've got you, right? We'll help correct you. We'll talk you through it. Now they can do a lot more than that really quickly. And so that part has really forced a lot of our senior guys to kind of, create some standard markdown files that they kind of plop in their source code directory to make sure that when the best that they can, that they're following some basic architectural guidelines and work as much as possible that these AI code development engines offer within guardrails, within a closed box environment.
Okay. And so beyond the fact that in your teams, of course, you have different levels of seniority, you have also different roles, right? Like products, more product oriented, more architecture oriented, dev, programmers, I guess testers are QA, DevOps. How do you see them use AI differently?
So we've separated our team out, and now we have everybody still works in pods, but we do have an organizational structure where some of our most talented engineers are providing guidelines or structural constraints for the architecture. They're loose. I will admit that, but they're there, and so in that regard, that's one kind of slight deviation. It used to be architecture, and anybody that's been in engineering for a long time, they kind of get a bad taste with architecture. They sit in their ivory tower and they kind of say something. This is not that. This is very hands-on devs that are just basically providing guardrails so that we don't get ourselves too deep into trouble. The other aspect I would say is product. I am seeing product soiree into engineering. That's hot. That was a hot take at our dinner the other night. I'm enjoying it. Now you have to take that with a grain of salt, and you have to understand that for maybe copy changes and color changes, that's not too big of a deal, and that trust is kind of earned along the way with the product and the engineers as they go. But they are soireeing into the engineering more than they've ever done before. The main component there we're pushing on is they have to learn GitHub. They have to learn some sort of source code repository. They have to have a basic idea of what they're doing and not just talk to Claude, hit enter, and shoot it off and call it a day. But most of them have been pretty into that. So in terms of that kind of segmentation, we are seeing, product kind of soaring into engineering. And then kind of back to what you were saying originally is the main aspect is the organization is just flattening. So there's everybody is hands-on these days, to some form or fashion. And so there's less focus on kind of line level engineering managers and just more focus on everybody working in their pod and getting as much functionality and as much value as they can out to the customer.
Ben, I'm curious, does this change the type of engineer that you guys are going after? For example, a full cycle or full development type of engineer might be more attractive in the future alongside an AI tooling rather than a more specific type of engineer in QA or DevOps, for example.
Yeah, this is really interesting aspect too. QA is another one. We're fully automating that. And that has its own problems too. Automating QA is definitely a process, especially when you're looking at some of those functional based tests. Um, and going back to what you were saying a little bit too, Oliver, is with the SRE, they're still primarily infrastructure. Now they are also soaring into engineering quite a bit more now. But you'll find some of the best SREs usually came from coding, and so it's not too much of a stretch for them. Jumping back to what you were saying, Thomas, is in terms of hiring, the main thing we're looking for is a willingness to accept AI. That's it. We still have our core. We're .NET, right? So having a good understanding of that is still very relevant at this point. But the interview process starts off with, here's a problem, solve it with AI. That's our kind of weed out. And there hasn't been as much industry adoption as you would think. People aren't ready for that, or they're not ready for that in an interview. Maybe that might be a more fair analysis. But and then the secondary part of the interview is just kind of making sure that there's some core architectural and fundamental understandings of .NET and programming in general.
So maybe just a personal curiosity tangent. I'm really surprised to hear that, Ben, that people are not adopting it or using it, or maybe they're just surprised to see it on a first round interview. What's been your experience? People are still hesitant in using it, or hesitant in showcasing that they're using it?
I I can only make assumptions, right? I don't know for sure. Now, we did start this back in kind of November, December last year with our interview process. And in AI world, that might as well have been 5 years ago. So a lot has changed since then. Um, I I think there was well, I can tell you what some have told me. There were a few people that were hesitant about adopting AI because the interview process was not utilizing AI yet, and so you start strengthening skill sets that are almost you know opposite of the skill set of typing out code, and that's scary if you're looking for that next role. I suspect that probably by the end of this year, definitely next year, almost every engineering team is going to be doing, when they're hiring, going to be following a very similar process where they start with AI. They give a problem, they say, "Look, we want to see you walk through it with AI." And then they'll have some sort of foundational core language that they kind of want to make sure that you have the basics on.
Very nice. Interesting. Okay. Moving on. So you've mentioned the pod system, and it seems like that's really great for scaling. Um, can you tell me if you anticipate, if you were to scale your team to double its size, would your pod system still be relevant and well working in that environment? And what would you have to change in order to make sure that scale is able to be done and able to be done in a correct and healthy way?
Well, I'm going to give a loaded answer to that, but I don't actually know. Yes, I do. Uh, there will be problems. This context thing of so many engineers writing code so fast. I also have another great friend that is actually over at ChatGPT. They say they're having multiple code commits. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but like a minute. Every minute they're having multiple code. it's unfathomable to me. Um, and I was just asking him similar questions on the scale, and kind of watching how, they've broken down the problem and at least made some pretty strong attempts to do that at scale was compelling to me. I won't dive too much into what they're doing, but for us, uh, I think the appropriate way to scale is you start developing a kind of a silo aspect in the regards that you'll have a grouping. I like to think of like Kubernetes almost. I don't know if you have in Kubernetes, you have your pod groupings and nodes and whatnot. So you'll start having the various nodes, various pods, and in those groups together, and those will all kind of filter up to maybe one orchestration or maybe multiple orchestrations and a primary orchestration on top of that. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm really excited to get there. I'm really excited to see the problems that arise and how we, as humans, how we solve them, but then also the technology that gets invented along the way that helps make that problem more solvable.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I've asked you about it. If you and your company are successful and you scale, how will you account for more engineers? Well, I guess on the flip side of that is, do you need to scale, or is the tooling going to get better? Is your process going to get better? Maybe scaling to you means in the current headcount just becoming more efficient. So, it's a way that I need to continue to think about the questions that I ask for the future is, what does success look like? And I don't think that's necessarily a scaling organization, but an organization who's producing more in a more efficient manner and driving revenue through that.
I can pile into that one. That's a heart to heart that I have with our CEO Vias a lot. And for him, is all about value, right? That's the end of the day. Like we're an expense, and what value are we driving to multiply that expense back to the company? And so for him, it's really just that. It's not about, do we add more people or can we do more with less? It's if we can do more with less and we want to add more people, are we compounding our value? Is there a multiplier in value there? And so that's kind of the back and forth that we're having with that conversation. So I think it just all depends on the stage of your company, what you're trying to accomplish, who your competitors are. But I do suspect that as everybody starts to adopt this, it'll be the same racing game as before. It'll just, the amount of functionality and the speed will just rapidly increase. But I think in the short term, there may be a decrease in engineers, but in the long term, there'll definitely be that ramp because everybody wants to win.
Thank God you said it. As the software podcast, we love to hear when people are optimistic about the future of engineers and continuing to bring in humans in the loop. But Olivier, my apologies. Please go ahead.
No. Well, talking about scaling and just finish on that topic. One of the, first of all, it's very, very difficult to scale. And we're talking about people here, to scale locally, right? So typically to scale, you need to allow people to be scattered around the country or even outside the country often. How do you see AI helping you with this the fact that more and more teams are globally distributed, if you will?
Yeah, we're definitely globally distributed. Um, how has AI played a role in that?
Not yet, maybe.
Yeah, I would say, I'm trying to think of it. I would say the main aspect that I would say that AI has played a role in is through helping people understand what code was written and learning the code base and what they need to do. So in the past, if you were doing this appropriately, you might make some fairly significant changes, and your time zone, it's bedtime or dinner, or you got to go pick up the kids, and they're waking up in the morning and they're getting their coffee. The what theoretically should have been the correct way to do that is you give them a big synopsis, a big lowdown. Hey, this is what I changed. This is where I'm at. Here you go. If I have a feeling you're going to be using this, and so you give this big report right out. Now we're not seeing that as much. We're just saying guys go, hey, it's in there. Use Claude. Tell Claude to go take a peek and give you a summary of what's changed and what you need to be aware of. And so I would say in that regard, that's the primary area that we're seeing, but again, I think we're just at the tip of the sword here.
Well, Ben, I think this has been a really invigorating conversation. I like that you've provided a lot of optimism for the efficiencies and what AI can bring in the future, but you've also brought optimism to the fact that humans will hopefully be alongside of AI producing great software for years and decades and centuries to come. To me, it's really rethinking and reshaping how teams operate, how work gets done, and how organizations scale.
Yeah. Yep. I can't help but the nerd in me think about Star Trek, and it's just it will be a part of all of our lives, but it'll just help us go to places we've never been before.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I think that AI will help with the collective.
It will. I agree.
Well said. Well, thank you again, Ben. Really appreciate you joining us. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. And please reach out to Ben, find him on LinkedIn, and continue to pick his brain because he's certainly a great resource.